Okay. Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of the Morning Cowbell. This is our second day in a row doing Morning Cowbell. Very excited to be here and very excited to once again do the cowbell in the morning live. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We will be talking about Coinbase and the SEC notice they just received. We will be talking about the Fed and how the Fed now is going up 25 basis points and what that actually means going forward, at least in this economy, and the implications it may have for lots of different sectors of the economy. We are also going to be talking about a new Palantir interview that apparently was published on March 13th, but I just saw it today. So that was on their Twitter. So I just took a look at it. So we're going to be talking about that. And finally, we're going to be talking about Cathie Wood, because Cathie Wood is again in the news speaking about innovation and the deflation that she said was going to come, which, look, maybe she is right that it is starting to come. And maybe it's going to finally happen. But she's again reiterating her points on some of the stuff that's going on. And we're discussing that. Grom plays, Alvarado, Vincent, Cameron, thank you all for being here in the morning. All right, let's get started with the morning cowbell. The Fed has decided to raise interest rates by 25 basis points. Not 50, not pausing, 25. And this was incredibly interesting because over the past week, as I've analyzed what the Fed is going to do, it seemed obvious, just like it seemed obvious to lots of different people, that the Fed was going to do 25 over 50. Now, the main reason why people thought it was going to be obvious that the Fed was going to do 25 over 50 is because of the banking collapse that we had. When Silicon Valley Bank collapsed and basically caused the contagion that was able to be contained within about 3 days, but led to the collapse of Signature Bank of New York, led to the almost collapse of First Republic in San Francisco, that then got basically bailed out by other banks by throwing in deposits. And now that company's doing okay. It was at 140, now it's at $15, but at least the stock's not gone. And then also the Credit Suisse buyout by UBS. So many things happened that would lead you to think that if we continue to further tighten rates at a substantial level, along with the quantitative tightening that we're doing, it would just be a recipe for a disaster, and it would be going too far too quickly, especially given the 10-year and the Treasury in terms of the bond market started to come down precipitously from like 4.5% down to 3.68%. And so if the inversion stops inverting as much as it was inverting in regards to bonds and stocks, and banks are starting to theoretically collapse and people are starting to take their money out of these regional banks and put them into the big four, you don't want to make a harder economic environment for consumers to do anything. I mean, that's why we gave stimulus checks back in 2020 during COVID, at least in the United States, was because we had so much business activity that shut down overnight. 6.8 million people lost their job in a month, that you need people to start spending. You need people to start building businesses again. You need to encourage and literally stimulate the economy. And so when that didn't happen, ultimately you get to the point where you have to do something dramatic. This is not the case. Now we have inflation at a reported 6%, and the Fed needs to try to get it down to 2%. Jerome Powell was very, very clear that until we get inflation down to 2%, nothing's going to change. He also said in the press conference yesterday at the FOMC meeting that there is likely not going to be a cut on rates this year. There might be a pause. He even said the Fed was thinking that there would be a pause before we get into raising rates. So they did consider and at least pontificate the potential of a pause before deciding for 25, but that would be very decisive. 50 would also be very decisive, and the Fed does not like to be very decisive, so they went with 25, kind of the safest option for them to go through. And now it's more likely than not we might get another basis point hike over the next 6 months. But if the Fed does decide to pause over the next couple of months, like Canada that paused at 4.5, I believe we're at 4.75 right now, that would probably be, at least in the Fed's mind, the right course of action. Let's take a look at Jerome Powell actually speaking about the potential for a soft landing.
I just wanted to ask, with all the events of the past 2 weeks, do you still see a possibility of a soft landing for the U.S. economy?
It's too early to say really whether these events have had much of an effect. It's hard for me to see how they would have helped the possibility, but I guess I would just say it's too early to say whether there really have been changes in that. The question will be how long this period is sustained. The longer it's sustained, then the greater will be the likely declines in or tightening in credit standards, credit availability. So we'll just have to see. I do still think, though, that there's a pathway to that. I think that pathway still exists, and we're certainly trying to find it.
It's very interesting when Jerome Powell says that there's a potential for a soft landing. Obviously, 25 basis points was their definition of potentially going soft on the market. But a soft landing would imply that millions of people do not lose their job. Inflation comes down more naturally than not by not continuing to hike up interest rates at a dramatic level. And that earnings for companies within the stock market, right? Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook. You talk about some of these big companies don't crap the bed when it comes to the earnings. Remember, the S&P is still trading at around 17 to 18 times its PE. Historically, it's around 14 to 15. So if you just look at that metric alone, a $399 S&P is going to have to come down a little bit if we want to get to the norm. If that's not going to happen, and again, the only way that happens is if a bunch of companies show bad earnings. And Q4 2022 was pretty good earnings. I mean, Facebook put up $32 billion, Google put up $70 billion. I think Apple put up more than 100 billion. Amazon put up like 125 billion. So when these companies are putting up these types of numbers, and yes, growth is not amazing, but it's also not bad. I mean, it's like meeting, if not exceeding some level of expectations, then it's really hard for the market to decide that we're just not going to buy these stocks, and we're not going to try to put our money in a place where we can get, a 7 to 8% return for the year versus bonds that are giving us maybe 3 to 4%. A soft landing to me would require inflation to come down on its own in order for unemployment to not have to rise. So the Fed says they want to get unemployment up at least 1%, right? So it's at 3.6 right now. If they get it to 4.3, 4.4, that would be another million jobs. And the labor markets are very tight. Jerome Powell also talked to you about yesterday about how those labor markets being tight makes us scared and worried for trying to get inflation down to 2%, because it's really hard to get inflation down to 2% when everyone has a job and everyone's taking the money they get from that job and spending it in the economy. If you get money from a job and you start spending it, there's going to be some inflationary effects, especially if inflation is already so high. The best way to reduce that is by people not having jobs. As sad as that sounds, that is the reason why Jerome Powell fought with Elizabeth Warren, because, Warren, from an ideological political perspective, doesn't want people to lose jobs. And Powell, from an economic macro perspective and, purely logical perspective, is like, I don't know how else we get rid of inflation unless that activity stops. And so that idea for a soft landing only happens if the Fed starts to reduce interest rates, cut them back. And the only way they start to cut them back is if they see inflation fall on its own. Now, Trueflation.com says we're at 4% inflation, not 6% inflation, which means technically we may start getting down to 2% maybe this year, maybe early 2024. And if that happens and, the S&P doesn't collapse down to 3,200 or 3,100, as a lot of analysts on Wall Street are saying, then we have absolutely, even if we get to 360 or 370 on the S&P, I think we've avoided a hard landing. That is the definition of a soft landing for me. But the question is if we're actually going to be able to get there. And what the Fed did yesterday was an indecisive approach that basically has one foot in the door, one foot out the door. And I believe CPI numbers next month are going to matter tremendously to decide if we pause or if we do another 25. If I had to answer right now, I think we pause. And as inflation comes down, as earnings start to show for these companies, and earnings are not horrendous, there may be a world in which we have a market that starts to decide to go up again. But it really depends on how the Fed decides to deal with inflation and if it's actually coming down in their estimates, and if earnings from companies are showing that growth is not stalling. And, we see a lot of layoffs from Facebook, and there's a lot of ways to interpret that. The Meta layoffs are like, well, they're becoming more lean and therefore they're saving more money. The Amazon layoffs are like, well, why are they firing 9,000 jobs in their highest growing departments like Twitch and advertising? And so there's a lot of mixed signals going on in the market, and we really don't necessarily have the answer to this. But all will be determined, I believe, next month when we get CPI data, unemployment data, and then how the Fed chooses to react to that data based on if they pause interest rates or if they don't pause interest rates. And we'll see what the Fed decides to do. All right, Sumrat, what's up? Matthew Koo, what's up? StreetCon CEO, hello. Marco, Amit, curious on your thoughts on PayPal, profitable business, strong band, good balance sheet. I like PayPal. I never bought them. If I'm going the financial route, the bank route, the fintech route, I think SoFi just has a lot more upside than PayPal. I think PayPal, you might be able to get a 2x over the next couple of years. I think SoFi, you can get a lot more than that. So from a growth perspective, SoFi is a little bit more speculative for me, but I like it. PayPal is a solid company, though. It's not a company that I would necessarily ignore. To me, I'm treating it more like a value stock. I know that it's been demolished by the market. At one point, it was $300. So where's PayPal trading at right now? PayPal Stock's like $90, right? No, 74. Yeah, I mean, look, I can't argue around wanting to have some of it in your portfolio and leaving it there. Especially because when I saw their lost earnings, it wasn't horrible, but it also wasn't the best. Yeah, like they're growing 7% year over year, right? So it's one of those companies where when you're growing 7% year over year, you just can't expect it to 3, 4, 5x even over the next 7, 8 years. Like it's growing 7% year over year. You got to have a company growing 40, 50% to even have the potential to get there. But as like a value play, it's not the worst idea in my opinion. SVB funding was political agenda and deserved to fail. Yeah, I mean, look, it definitely deserved to fail. The question just becomes all those small companies that set up bank accounts and hoping that they were just going to store their money there. Do they deserve to go out of business? And so, as SVB absolutely deserves to fail, but the FDIC protecting a lot of businesses, that is a good idea. My question is that the deflation you're seeing is because of growth and competition. That is why prices are going down, or the reality is that the economy is slowing. I think there's a lot of factors for why deflation is going down. Growth and competition can be one of those things. The rise of AI, believe it or not, even though it's probably not having the most significant effects, it will have massive deflationary effects just by the nature of how it cuts robotics manufacturing manufacturing times in half, and Ginkgo Bioworks is working on that in particular. I mean, Tesla and their use of AI in robotics, the level of productivity it's giving back to workers, people just being able to be more productive. I mean, productivity is one of the keys to getting deflation to come down, and that's the whole thesis with the robotaxis, right? If we are more productive, then because we don't have to drive our cars. I've been more productive by using ChatGPT in a lot of different ways, and that's an AI powered tool. So I think there's a lot of reasons why deflation is coming down. The economy is slowing. Yeah, I mean, well, we've seen the GDP numbers. The economy is theoretically slowing. It's just a question of how these companies are going to show, and that's why I talked about earnings in the last segment, right? Like, how much are these earnings going to impact where the economy is going? If Google comes up and they show like, $72 billion of revenue, $68 billion of revenue, which is 2% down in terms of growth or 2% up in terms of growth from last quarter, it's not going to be good for Google, right? Because they're just not growing that much. And the economy is going to have, the market is going to have to take a little bit of a hit. But we're going to have to see, the next earnings, how 2023, the first 90 days are treating some of these big companies. All right, let's get into our second piece of news. If I can just pull it up right here. Where did this one go? I think I had it right here. Give me 1 second. Then we will discuss it. Okay, here we go. So let's pull this up right here. We've got to talk about an interesting one. A very interesting one. All right. Coinbase. Coinbase has just received a Wells notice by the SEC. Now, I did not know what a Wells notice was before this Wells notice happened. And let me know in the comments if you knew what a Wells notice was. But I never knew what a Wells notice was. Apparently, a Wells notice is the thing they send to a company before they're deciding to completely enforce a bunch of moves at you and start to really interrogate and audit your company. And this happened, warning the exchange that it identified potential violations of U.S. securities law. Now, let's read through this and then have a couple of interesting thoughts for why the United States might be doing this. The SEC issued crypto exchange Coinbase a Wells notice, warning the company that it identified violations of U.S. securities law. Coinbase shares fell nearly 12% in extended hours. Now I think it's up about 7% in pre-market trading. So the market's kind of bugging it off. Based on discussions with the staff, the company believes these potential enforcement actions will relate to aspects of the company's spot market staking service Coinbase Earn, Coinbase Prime, and Coinbase Wallet. Coinbase said the potential civil action may seek injunctive relief, disgorgement, and civil penalties. And I believe this is relating to kind of some of the interest rates and staking services that Coinbase is able to provide to customers that park their money in Coinbase. A Wells notice is typically one of the final steps before the SEC formally issues charges. It generally lays out the framework for the regulatory argument and offers the potentially accused an opportunity to rebut the SEC's claims. Now, if we go to Brian Armstrong, who is an absolute stellar CEO, one of my favorite CEOs of all time, to be honest, he said, 2 years ago, the SEC reviewed our business in detail and approved Coinbase to go public. Our S1 clearly expanded our asset listing process and included 57 references to staking. Again, staking is when you kind of like from my knowledge, and I'm not the most knowledgeable about this, but you put your crypto on an exchange, and then as a result of it, you can stake it, which means you can kind of make some interest off of it. Other people can use it in a different way. Again, I don't know the most about it, and I'll actually talk about why it's important that I don't know the most about it. But it's one of those things where you are able to use your assets to generate some returns on your assets, if I'm understanding it correctly. And the SEC approved back in 2020 when Coinbase went public at $250 a share. That was okay. Coinbase runs a rigorous asset review process and has rejected more than 90% of assets that have applied to be listed on the platform. It's funny because, Dogecoin, Shiba Inu, these obviously stupid shit coins were approved to be on. Even I remember in 2021, Coinbase was advertising to buy Dogecoin on Coinbase because it makes sense, right? Dogecoin was trending, but the fact that they approved it probably shows, what they actually cared about. While we understand that this is all part of the journey to reforming our financial system, we are right on the law, confident in the facts, and welcome the opportunity for Coinbase and by extension the broader crypto market to get before court. We are proud to stand up for our customers and industry in these moments. Going forward, the legal process will provide an open and public forum before an unbiased body where we will be able to make clear for all the SEC that has simply not been reasonable, fair, or even demonstrated a seriousness of purpose when it comes to engagement on digital assets. Now, why is this really interesting to me? Number one is that Coinbase, to my knowledge, has been one of the only crypto exchanges that has actually been compliant and dealt with regulations in a meaningful way. Pretty much every crypto company that I've seen, or every crypto company that I've heard of, has not been able to maintain the level of regulatory frameworks that the United States in particular and the SEC are compliant with. Binance, right? That's why they operate in a totally different country. FTX, obviously, we saw the collapse of them. Lots of other exchanges, it's very scary to kind of put your coins on them because you're just you don't know if you're going to be protected. You don't know if you can access someone. You don't know if you can even talk to customer service. Coinbase was one of the first crypto accounts I opened back in 2017. I put $15 into Bitcoin. I still think the $15 are there, to be honest. And it's I was actually, that's when Bitcoin was going up to 20,000, and I was in my macroeconomics class, and literally my professor was like, "This is the dumbest thing ever. Don't buy it." And I was like, "Nope, that's why I got to buy it." Now I think he might have been right about that, but I, as a rebellious 20-year-old, I was like, "Well, I need to buy it now." My macro econ professor said that's stupid, but Coinbase has been one of those companies that has always been compliant. They've always been good. So for them to get a Wells notice, I think there's a little bit of a deeper issue for why they're getting a Wells notice here. And here's a little bit of my theory. And it's not that far out of a theory. It's something a lot of people believe in, but here's a little bit of the concept. If the United States feels that cryptocurrencies writ large are a threat to their agenda, are a threat to the US dollar, are a threat to the potential devaluation of the dollar, meaning if the dollar enters into some level of inflation or even hyperinflation based on the $300 billion we just printed and sort of the vertical printing of the money supply, if that's happening, and crypto, in particular Bitcoin, is the best reserve asset for people to stake their money into, would that be perceived as a threat? We know that Balaji Srivastava, the former CTO of Coinbase, has a public bet going on right now that he believes Bitcoin will reach $1 million in 90 days. And if it doesn't, he will lose $1 million. But his entire purpose of doing this massive bet is to force people to recognize that this is a bad thing that's going on with the Fed, and printing and high interest rates are not going to reduce inflation. And we are going to enter into hyperinflation, and Bitcoin is the only solution. Is there a world in which the United States sees information about hyperinflation that the rest of us don't have access to, or they feel that things are going to get bad before they get good, and they want to get rid of crypto? And the best way to get rid of crypto is to get rid of you outright ban it, or you get rid of the one exchange that has, the most users and the most coins on their exchange, to be able to be unregulatory and not fit to be working with the SEC and a harm to consumers, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we get crypto out of America. Now, I don't think that's necessarily happening, but it definitely makes you think. It definitely, because this SEC notice seems so out of the blue. It seems so ridiculous. I mean, Coinbase and Brian Armstrong have not been people that have tried to manipulate or do bad things. I mean, in general, promoting Shiba Inu or Dogecoin, I don't think violates the SEC laws. It's, just another asset that people are willing to buy for. And it's a little shady that Coinbase is promoting it because it's bad for consumers, but it's not necessarily illegal. And so the idea that Coinbase somehow now is not fit in the regulatory frameworks of what is required for crypto. I mean, this is not the first time the SEC has given them a trouble. About a month ago, Brian Armstrong went to Washington, D.C. to talk with politicians in Congress because the SEC was giving him even more problems, and they were thinking of potentially banning certain parts of their business. It makes you think, is there a world in which America is starting to not like crypto, and our freedom and our democracy is not liking the absolute freedom, the immutable freedom that Bitcoin offers, and there are some steps to potentially ban it. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but it definitely makes you think. Overall, I think this SEC enforcement is probably not going to result in anything meaningful if Coinbase has some decent lawyers and they can fight it back. But the fact that they're even trying, like this came out of the blue, this came out of absolutely nowhere, makes you wonder. Cathie Wood probably got tipped off. She sold 160,000 shares yesterday. 160,000 is a lot of shares. Coinbase has ran up, I think, to $83 because Bitcoin has ran up as well, up to 28,000. And when Bitcoin runs, Coinbase runs because Coinbase makes a transaction fee off of trading crypto. So when crypto is up and more people are buying crypto, Coinbase is taking a percentage fee based on the current price. So if Bitcoin is $1, Coinbase doesn't make that much money off the trade. If Bitcoin is $60,000, then Coinbase makes a lot of money off the trade. And Brian Armstrong also sold 29,000 shares yesterday. So you were selling some shares and then this letter comes out. So, I mean, someone might have tipped them off. But ultimately, I don't think anything happens. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Coinbase gets exposed? Do you think they get banned? And do you think there is some ulterior motive by the United States to now put this regulatory announcement on crypto and Coinbase? Juan Carlos, what's up? F14 odd. Cash App, what's up? Square, yep, Square is better than because they only sell Bitcoin, not securities. That is true. Square is a very Bitcoin maximalist, in the words of Jack Dorsey. He's a Bitcoin king. Tessa Best, what's up, peoples? What's up, Tessa? Again, the morning open stream will happen at 9:20. This is just my morning cowbell show. This is the second day doing it. So we are doing a CEO and Cathie totally had no idea. Definitely not insider knowledge. Yeah, they had no idea that the stock was going to fall because the SEC is coming after them. I mean, it's crazy. It's like they definitely know something, bro. It's just like if you can prove they don't know, then they never have to worry about it. Okay, getting into our third topic of the day. Late but made it. Margin, thank you for being here. Reza, thank you for being here. Block down 12%. Hindenburg is shorting Block. Oh, crap. They said yesterday they were going to short somebody. Hindenburg is shorting Block. Oh, my goodness. Wait, how do you know this? Because they didn't tweet about it yet. Look. They said new short report coming soon. Or is that just... Wait, where do you see that? Look, I saw this yesterday. And I was like, who are they shorting? I thought it might be C3 AI, to be honest, but that's just the Palantir bull in me. Wait, where's the Block short report? Where's the Block short report? Can someone link it? Where's the Block short report? Square? Because I'll do a whole segment on that right now. We'll take a look at it. Does someone have the link? Please let me know. I can't find it. It's not on their Twitter. Usually it's on their Twitter. All over Twitter. Okay, hold on. So let me go to Twitter. Hold on. Let me go. How do I go to home? Okay. Square. Let's just type in Square. Or let's type in Block. Block short report. Yeah, we'll cover that right now. That's the cool thing about doing a morning stream too. We get to cover it. And then Twitter search is obviously from the night. Oh, wait, no. There it is. Here we go. Oh, here we go. Hindenburg's new short report is on Square. Here we go. Oh, we got it. Oh, boy. All right, let's do it. We're not going to be able to cover all of it, but let's do a segment on it. I got it. Okay, here we go. Breaking news, everybody. I'm officially a news anchor saying that there's breaking news. We have some breaking news while we're doing the morning stream today. Hindenburg Research yesterday tweeted, hey, we've got a new short report coming, and this one is a big one. I didn't know who they were going to short. I had some ideas in my head, but never would I think they were shorting the company that I just found out they are shorting. Thank you to the people in the live chat who informed me about this. This is one. Okay, before I share it, well, you probably already know this if you keep up with financial headlines, but if you don't know this, because I'm not going to put it in the title, comment right before I share. 3, 2, 1. Who do you think it is? I did not expect this one. Block, Square, Jack Dorsey. How inflated user metrics and frictionless fraud facilitation enabled insiders to cash over $1 billion. I actually have some friends that I really, really respect that are massive, massive fans of Square, and not just like random friends. These are friends that are in high-level senior positions at companies. I met them over the past year on YouTube. You know, they're actually some mentors to me, and they love Square. They have very big positions in Square. So I think this is going to be, you know, I never bought Square, but I always was warmed up to the idea just because I had these friends who are always telling me that Square is, you know, a decent play. But I never bought it, and it's very interesting to see now that it is being shorted. All right, so let's take a look at this. We're not going to go through the entire report, but let's try to get some of the main things. Block, formerly known as Square Inc., is a $44 billion market cap company that claims to have developed a frictionless and magical financial technology with a mission to empower the unbanked and the underbanked. Again, Jack Dorsey, a huge Bitcoin bull. His entire thesis is like, how do we create freedom within the banking system? This like super libertarian, blah, 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 former CEO of Twitter, just like horrible management of Twitter. I mean, if you even take a look at one of the Twitter files, the amount of censorship that was going on under Jack Dorsey's fingers was just absolutely ridiculous. It was bad. Like, it was not good. But he is a Bitcoin bull, and that's why Block it's named Block, right? Blockchain. They changed it from Square. Our 2-year investigation has concluded that Block is systematically taking advantage of the demographics it claims to be helping. The magic behind Block business has not been disruptive innovation. Remember, Cathie Wood has a big position in Square as well, but rather the company's willingness to facilitate fraud against consumers and the government, avoid regulation, dress up predatory loans and fees as revolutionary technology, and mislead investors with inflated metrics. What a claim. Our research involved dozens of interviews, okay? Most analysts are excited about the post-pandemic surge of Block's Cash App platform. I use that Cash App platform every week. I like it. With expectations that its 51 million monthly transactive users and low customer acquisition costs will drive high margin growth and serve as the future platform to offer new products. You can now trade crypto, buy stocks on it, all that stuff. Our research indicates, however, that Block has widely overstated its genuine user counts and has understated its customer acquisition costs. Interesting. Former employees estimated that 40 to 75% of the accounts they reviewed were fake, involved in fraud, or were additional accounts tied to a single individual. 51 million TAUs, transacting active users. If we just multiply that on the low end by 40%, you've got 20.4 million accounts that are theoretically fake. That's a big claim. That's a big claim because, I mean, you can't lie about fake users, because investors, if you have fake users and investors are betting on your user growth, like, that's pure, like fraud in terms of how you're communicating your financials. Core to the issue is that Block has embraced one traditionally very underbanked segment of the population: criminals. The company's Wild West approach to compliance made it easy for bad actors to mass create accounts for identity fraud and other scams, then extract stolen funds quickly. Even when users were caught engaging in fraud or other prohibited activity, Block blacklisted the account without banning the user. A former customer service rep shared screenshots showing how blacklisted accounts were regularly associated with dozens or hundreds of other active accounts of suspected of fraud. This phenomenon of allowing blacklisted users was so common that rappers bragged about it in hip-hop songs. Now, it is no secret that Cash App and Square as a platform have been targeting urban communities and hip-hop communities. And the reason I say this is because there's many hip-hop podcasts. For example, the Joe Budden podcast. I believe that the Cash App was a sponsor for them for almost 3 years. Their logo was then at the bottom of every single podcast. And those demographics are primarily going to people in urban areas. They are correct about how the marketing is geared towards more urban populations, but the idea that is leading to a ton of fraud is interesting. And I mean, they would have to definitely show some evidence that is the case. Block obfuscates how many individuals are on the Cash App platform by reporting misleading transacting metrics filled with fake and duplicate accounts. CEO Jack Dorsey has publicly touted how Cash App is mentioned in hundreds of hip-hop songs as evidence of its mainstream appeal. A review of those songs showed that the artists are not generally rapping about Cash App's smooth user interface. Many are describing it as a scam, traffic drugs, or even pay for murder. See our compilation video on this. What the heck? Okay, I'm not going to play the compilation video because it's going to get this whole stream demonetized, but we're definitely going to go through that here. I paid them hitters through Cash App. Block paid to promote a video for a song called Cash App, which described paying contract killers through the app. The song's artist was later arrested for attempted murder. Oh my goodness. Like, I've heard that song, so I know what he's talking about because I am a bit of a hip hop head. But I don't know if that necessarily means that the app is lying all about older users. All right, let's go down a little bit more. COVID-19 pandemic and nationwide lockdowns pose an existential threat to Block's key driver of gross profit at the time. In this environment, amid Cash App's anti-compliance free-for-all, the app facilitated a massive wave of government COVID relief payments. CEO Jack Dorsey tweeted that users could get government payments through Cash App immediately with no bank account needed due to its frictionless technology. That sounds like a good idea, but within weeks of Cash App's accounts receiving their first government payments, states were seeking to claw back suspected fraudulent payments. Washington State wanted more than $200 million back. Arizona sought to recover more than $500 million. So apparently, the process for receiving unemployment or stimulus checks during the COVID pandemic was not as frictionless as they say that it is. Rapper Nuke Bizzle made a popular music video about committing COVID fraud. Several weeks later, he was arrested and eventually convicted for committing fraud. The only payment provider mentioned in the indictment was Cash App, which was used to facilitate the fraudulent payments. This is insane. This is a huge report. This is going pretty deep. Oh my goodness. Wow. Competitor PayPal has disclosed that it's under investigation by both the SEC over its similar use of a small bank to avoid interchange fee caps. Block's $29 billion deal to acquire buy now, pay later service. This was January 2022. Afterpay has been celebrated by Block as a major financial innovation, allowing users to buy things like a pair of shoes or a t-shirt and pay over time, only incurring massive fees if subsequent payments are late. Afterpay was designed in a way that avoided responsibility lending rules in its native Australia, extending a form of credit to users without income verification or credit checks, which is true. I mean, if you engage in buy now, pay later, you don't really have to have a certain amount of credit. They just kind of let anyone be able to buy now and literally pay later. The service doesn't technically charge interest, but late fees can reach APR equivalents to as high as 289%. The acquisition is flopping. In 2022, the year Afterpay was acquired, it lost $357 million, accelerating from 2021 losses north of $184 million. There is even a lot more, but let's go to the end. In sum, we think Block has misled investors on key metrics, embraced predatory offerings and compliance worst practices in order to fuel growth and profit from facilitation of fraud against consumers and the government. We also believe Jack Dorsey has built an empire and amassed a $5 billion personal fortune, professing to care deeply about the demographics he's taking advantage of, with Dorsey and top executives already having sold $1 billion in equity on Block's meteoric pandemic run. It ran up to about $200 at the height of 2021. They have ensured they will be fine regardless of the outcome for everyone else. Let's go into the stock market and take a look at what's going on with the stock as this is breaking right now at 8:43 a.m. The focus of the report from everything I've read seems to be Cash App. They believe that and that's a big part of the business. Cash App is their consumer-facing brand. It is the thing that most people feel has the most potential just because the TAM is kind of unlimited with Cash App and all the different people that can be affected by it. Sounds like teenagers made this report to try to cover a short. Yeah, look, on first glance of the report, it doesn't sound the most convincing. Like there's an argument, but it's not like it's not like, oh my goodness, this is just really bad. There's a lot of claims, and I'm not sure if a lot of warrants are there. Look at Block. That's ridiculous. Down 17%. That's a lot in the pre-market, man. Down to $59. That's a lot. Wow. I'm just putting this out there right now. That is being down 17% on that is ridiculous. So Square, Block Inc. down 17%. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, that was breaking news. We'll keep analyzing it more and more. I don't think immediately that they have a case. I think if 75% of the users of Cash App are fake, maybe there's a case. Ultimately, revenues are revenues, right? They've been able to produce real revenues. Now, if those revenues are faulty and they're avoiding paying certain fees or whatever, then maybe there's an argument. But Square has been able to grow their revenues, and the money they get, even if it's not 51 million transacting users, is still a substantial amount. If users are one of the core metrics to define if a company should be invested in, then yeah. And if 75% of them are fake, I mean, we all know every company lies about their users, but it's in a world of like 2 to 5%, right? Which is give or take. But when you get to 10, 20, 30%, that's when, I mean, Twitter was lying about their users for like 5 years because they had one account count as 2 accounts if you didn't log back in. And so that affected them for like 2 to 3% of DAUs, MAUs, but it wasn't the biggest deal in the world. And Elon bought it like a month later when that was exposed. But if they are lying about their users, they're lying about their growth, and the whole thing about rappers talking about the app, and that's, to me, it's like, that's kind of just marketing. And I don't know if that's necessarily like, oh my gosh, a rapper said he's using this app to commit a fraud, because unless that fraud is happening at scale and there's a massive downside to the business, then it's just marketing, right? Then it's just like a rapper using the app in their song. I don't know. I'm not totally convinced as I'm reading it. It sounds salacious. It sounds bad, but it doesn't sound like this is a company that is about to go under because of the short report. So let's see what happens. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Square is now in trouble, down 70% in the pre-market because of this Hindenburg short report? Down 70% is crazy. Yeah, it's crazy, man. Buy the dip. Well, Square is actually a fun company, man. I always wanted their earnings last time. They popped like almost 15% after earnings because their numbers always turn out good. But if their numbers are fake, if the transacting users are fake, then, maybe not. Talking so much about the rapper thing makes it feel like they don't have other real things to mention. Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say, Sasky. Talking so much about the rapper thing and like making a compilation video of rappers using Cash App in there, that's just good marketing by Cash App. Now, is there any legitimacy towards people using the app to commit fraud? Even if there is it at the level at which the company falls and is massively shorted? I mean, it's down 70% already. So if they had a short on, Hindenburg is already up 17% on their report. And you've got to remember, like 17% gain in one day or whatever. I know they said they've been doing 2 years of research, but whatever. Like 17% up in a day is not easy. So if they're already up, they could have closed their short by now. So we will see. Yeah, Tanner, we got to get Tanner's thoughts on this. Tanner also understands Square as well. They're pump and dumping the rappers, literally. They're pump and dumping the rappers. The fact that they're using rappers is ridiculous. Isn't that kind of evil? Because isn't that kind of like how people say Bitcoin is evil because criminals use it? Yeah, I think their argument is just that they're getting away with not paying fees and all this stuff, and Bitcoin's kind of meant to never have to worry about that stuff. So that's why it's a little different, but it's the same argument. And I don't know, reading that report and comparing it to like the evilness of Cash App or how Bitcoin works. They didn't mention crypto at all. They didn't mention like Bitcoin as an argument because they know that's a horrible argument. If you're like, people use Bitcoin to buy drugs, like that argument was rebuked 15 years ago. It's like we got to get rid of that argument. So they went the rapper angle, which didn't seem that strong. Samarth, yo, Amit, love this new earlier stream. Yes, thank you for being here. And again, we will have market open at 9:20 as always. All right, so we have one more story to cover. That one just kind of broke through. Let's do Cathie Wood. Should we do Cathie Wood? I should do Cathie Wood. Let's do Cathie Wood. Should we do Cathie Wood or should we do Palantir? Cathie Wood or Palantir? Let's do Cathie Wood. Cathie Wood might be a little bit, well, do we want to do Cathie Wood or Palantir? Mitch Spector, what's up? Chris Clark, what's up? I think we will do, let's do Palantir and then I'll cover Cathie on the morning stream. We'll do that. Okay, here we go. And we've got Palantir. 25% of Palantir Korea has just been purchased by a company in South Korea called HD Hyundai. And excuse me if I'm saying it wrong. HD Hyundai acquires a 25% stake in Palantir Korea. Now they have entered the AI business by securing a stake in the Korean subsidiary of Palantir, which provides public sector AI services to U.S. intelligence services agencies and the military. South Korea and the United States have a very good relationship, very strong allies. Palantir is integrated very deeply in Japan and South Korea. So it's actually really nice to see a business in Korea. Now, this is the HHI Heavy Industries, Hyundai Heavy Industries. HHI was a company that partnered with Palantir to do shipping and manufacturing logistics. This is a $45 million contract that Palantir got last year. So Palantir is no stranger to the Korean markets and working with Korea. It's nice to see them secure a 25% stake in the company. The new joint venture will introduce and provide customized big data platform services to public and private sectors in Korea. HD Hyundai will be responsible for establishing a foothold in the Korean market and devising an entry strategy. Palantir will build and run big data platforms and also provide its software to its customers. Now, why is this important? BP, we saw last week, did an interview with Palantir. There's Peter Thiel, and I believe this is the chief president of HD Hyundai. Peter Thiel, obviously, the co-founder of Palantir. BP did an interview last week where they talked about how Palantir was so crucial for the company. It was so valuable. It was so important for the company that they ended up buying 1% of Palantir. They paid $431 million. Now they have liquidated that stake in the company, but they bought 1% of them in August 2021, I believe, because it was just that valuable for them to own the company. So when the company is so good, when the product is so important, when the analytics and data platform that they're able to provide is so different than what else has been seen on the market, that you decide to literally buy 25% of the company because you're like, not only do I want to use their services, I want to make sure that I own a portal into their equity. I own a world in the upside that I can participate in because I believe this company is going to have massive upside because I've seen what they've been able to do for my business. That's when you know that it's very exciting, right? That's when you know that you've got something that's interesting. And that's why I think it's a interesting thing that HC Hyundai decided to be like, hey, we're just going to acquire an entire 25% stake in Palantir. Now, this also comes right after an interview that I didn't get to see. Apparently, this dropped 10 days ago, but I really never got a chance to see it. I want to go through a little bit of it with Palantir's Alex Karp in Lobs. This is a written interview. It's not a video interview. So I want to go through a couple of questions that were asked and then go through some of the things that Karp said. So Palantir is an American company that is close to the CIA and specializes in big data analysis. What does France represent for Palantir? And I believe this was a French news outlet, which is why they're asking about France. Karp says, our first two markets are the United States and Great Britain, and then France is on par with Germany, but Paris is our main office in the European Union. Its role is very important because it is our base for us to develop the rest of the continent. It represents significant revenue and a strategic mission. Besides that, they have many people who are successful at Palantir have one thing in common. They speak French. Next question. Just before you had a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky in June 2022, you mentioned that the risk of nuclear conflict was greater than we think. Why? I said that at a time when Americans thought there was zero risk. At the time, we weren't allowed to talk about it, but in this conflict, the Ukrainians are successfully using our software against the Russian army. Building Palantir over the past 20 years, I've seen how companies, secret services, and terrorists underestimate the power of software. When one side, Ukraine, uses heroism and agility alongside our platform, they can beat the other side, Russia, who weren't expecting it, and that's the case. It can become very dangerous because Vladimir Putin reasons in terms of a zero-sum game. He is convinced that the victory for the Ukrainians would be a loss for Russia, which is quite foreign to the American way of thinking. And he's absolutely correct about that. I mean, we still don't know how Putin is going to take this news about Ukraine potentially winning. This is why we have Xi Jinping now in Russia and, having the little tea party with Putin trying to figure out a solution to this conflict and brokering a peace deal. But, I think Putin's still not smart enough. I think he's too smart to launch a nuclear weapon, but it's not like he hasn't thought about it before, especially if he thinks that he's losing because he's an irrational dictator. Let's go to some of these other questions. How many governments are using your platform in Europe? Karp says, it took us 5 to 6 years to build this tool and another 5 years to systematize it. This is why our product is a hit in Europe. Although the one client that we have the right to name is Denmark, I can tell you that our platform is really used massively in Europe. It is easier to identify countries that do not use us. That is interesting. So we don't have an exact number of how many governments are using Palantir in Europe. We know that Lithuania, Poland, obviously the UK, Germany, France, Denmark, all of these countries are using Palantir. But if he says it's easier to identify countries that do not use it, that's not a bad sign. Now, the problem is governmental growth has not increased in Europe as much as it has, and Palantir has been even, honest about the fact that governmental growth has not gone up. So let's hope that government growth, even though the platform is being used in Europe, it's being used in more places in Europe and in more subsidiaries of different forms of the government in European governments, because that would lead to some more growth, because that just hasn't been happening over the past quarter. Let's take a look at this question. In the past, Palantir has been accused by the American left of having provided the tools to authorities to track down illegal immigrants, of having helped the government to protect itself from WikiLeaks, or having been involved in the Cambridge Analytical scandal. Are these controversies behind you today? Karp's response: the immigration affair in the United States has been completely politicized. Even in Japan, which hardly accepts any immigrants, I've been asked questions about it. That said, the controversy does not bother me. It is normal that these debates are continuing because Palantir has played a central role in the most important issues affecting Western democracies over the last 10 years, preventing the takeover of the far right in France and elsewhere, which is linked to the resolution of terrorism, saving lives during the pandemic, preventing or counting territorial invasions in Eastern Europe, mainly in Ukraine. And I think our role will be even more important over the next 10 years. I think this is the best answer you can give to someone who criticizes the company of being too far to the right, quote unquote, and hurting leftist causes. Because at the end of the day, they are trying to protect Western democracy. And protecting Western democracy, people think it's this horrible thing to say, but it's actually one of the best things you can do, because Western democracy is better than pretty much every other system that exists. And that's coming from someone who lives in a Western democracy, but also it's objectively true. It's just better than communism, right? So at the end of the day, if that's the mission you're standing up for, there might be gray spots in between that. But if that's the overarching mission, then that's something good to try to live up to. The problem is also the way in which your customers use your monitoring tool. They say it can be used in an unethical way, as we saw in the Israeli spyware Pegasus. Karp says the question is a relevant one, but over a 20-year period, we weren't all that wrong about it. We have never sold anything to Chinese or Russian institutions. It makes a lot of sense now, but didn't make sense 15 years ago. And again, it makes a lot of sense. That's where Chinese investors and Russian investors wanted to get in on the company. That's where other investors were pressuring them to sell to China and Russia, but they said, nope, it's too powerful. We're not going to sell it to them. But you still sell to countries with little respect for human rights like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Karp says, we sell to certain countries in the Middle East. They have their own code of ethics, which is not exactly the same as ours. There is no perfect answer. We've turned down some big contracts due to ethical reasons, and I'm proud of that. But when I explain this to my investor, they ask the board why I'm still the CEO. That said, the problem is a complex one. For example, if we sell to the French state, is it legitimate? But what happens if Marine Le Pen comes to power? So this is an interesting thing, right? Because yes, countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia don't have that much respect for human rights. And Karp kind of gives a cop-out answer by saying, look, they have different perspectives than us, which is why, we can't necessarily challenge their ethical frameworks. One could argue China and Russia also have totally different perspectives, which is why you shouldn't challenge their ethical framework. I would argue that China and Russia go a step beyond some of the countries in the Middle East in terms of, yes, maybe they're not all democracies, but China and Russia are proving themselves to be absolutely insane dictatorships, to the point where you can objectively argue they're a degree worse than some of these other companies or countries. And then, Karp is saying, if we sell to the French state, it is legitimate, which is good. But if you have some far right figures come to power, is it still legitimate to sell to the French state? And that's where you get into all these ethical questions that are really, really hard to deal with. And I think no company can manage these questions effectively. Not oil companies, not social media companies, really very few companies. And you need to have some objective guidelines like Russia invading Ukraine, which is why all companies start to leave and exit Russia, which even though it's going to hurt their bottom line, they know it's the right thing to do. So there's never a perfect answer to this, but if you can at least make the best answer with the tools available, that's probably the best way that you want to do this. Okay, last question we'll go through. On these types of questions, Peter Thiel and the other co-founder of Palantir, you are politically apart. Whose views prevail? This is a common question that people ask, because Karp and Thiel is a libertarian. Karp is a self-described socialist. Peter and I are close friends, and I don't have many of those. Moreover, his political ideas are more complex than what people say, especially on human rights. He's been very effective chairman for 20 years, and I run the company. We have lively discussions on every subject. Unlike him, I think Trump is an abomination. Besides, I warned Hillary Clinton's collaborators during his campaign that he might win, but they thought I was crazy. That said, even before these sorts of dilemmas reach me or Peter, I've had Palantirians yelling at me, we can't do this, and sometimes I agree with them. I made a really interesting video back in 2022 called The Paradoxical Relationship Between Alex Karp and Peter Thiel. I would recommend checking that out if you just type that into YouTube, because I did a really, really big deep dive on why the socialist and libertarian philosophy that are intertwined within each other actually results in the best business because of their disagreements. And so if you want to see kind of my take on how they disagree and why they disagree, you can check out why I think that them disagreeing is ultimately a good thing. But this was the new Karp interview. South Korea getting and HD Hyundai getting a 25.1% stake in Palantir, and Palantir's latest interview with Alex Karp. I'll link the interview in the description of this video. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think about Karp's answers. And brand new Karp interview. Thank you all for listening and watching. I'll see you in the next one. Okay. Here we go. So that's it for the morning stream. Thank you guys for being here. Well, we're about to start the next morning stream at 9:20. Man, Amit has really turned into a big YouTuber on all the time now. I am not a big YouTuber. Some people have been saying that. And like in the grand scheme of things, I'm not a big YouTuber at all. But we're trying to 10x the channel this year. And so we'll see what we can do. Look, I think one of my strong suits is communication and kind of speaking on the spot. Now it's just a question of doing it a lot, because at the end of the day, when it comes to content, if you're not able to put out a lot, like the way I've understood YouTube is it's a jungle and there's so much content. And if you're not constantly putting it out, which means you also have to put out constant quality, like it's just such a tough game to be involved in. But I think I have a shot of surviving in the game and advancing in the game. I just got to really, really push myself. So yeah, got to keep doing it from there. All right, that's it. We're going from there. We're going to keep going. let's end on this comment. Your extreme lack of knowledge on other countries with regards to democracy is grotesque. It literally makes you sound like a brainwashed sheep. Well, there's going to be some comments that come from that angle. Look, I know other countries have different perspectives on democracy. I know, obviously, I'm from India. I understand more collectivist Eastern philosophy over Western philosophy. I have objectively decided for myself that individual rights, freedoms, Western democracy, that is a good thing. And maybe my opinion will change in 10 years, but in 2015, I didn't think that was the case. I was going to vote for Bernie Sanders. I was more on the socialist left. 2023 is different. I took some economic classes. Things have changed. So, like, you know, those comments are fine, but I do think that Western democracy is good at the end of the day. Not that it's perfect, but the ideals of Western democracy, the ideals of having individual freedoms are good. And I don't think that opinion can be changed. Not everything is good, but individual freedoms are probably good. Palantir South Korea was 25% of Palantir South Korea, which is a subsidiary of Palantir Skills, were purchased from HD Hyundai. Big YouTubers have real bricks. They are real bricks. I don't know how many times I tell you guys, they are real bricks. Look how real they are right there. That's real. I don't know what else to tell you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I appreciate it. It means a lot. Again, 144 people. I think we had 180 just a couple minutes ago. Joining in the live stream means a lot to me. This is the second day of the morning cowbell. I hope it offers value. Please let me know in the comments what stuff you want to see me cover every day, different segments we can do on this channel, a bunch of different things. Again, it's super fun, super exciting to wake up every morning and do a morning stream for people that are willing to listen, comment, take their time, and engage with it. So it means the absolute world for me. In 18 minutes, we will have the morning open live stream where we ring the bell at 9:30. So I will see you there at 9:20, and we'll keep going from there. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you in 20 minutes. Bye-bye.